Hello everybody, welcome back. And we've covered a couple of topics already, so well done for staying with me and well done for finding material in there that you can apply and starting to use it in your presentations to make a difference to your confidence, your engagement, your interest, and your relaxation and sense of control within your presentations. So the first one, we had a look at how we could make a powerful presentation that sells, focusing on making sure we've got a sales message and then backing it up with the appropriate data and proof. Then we moved on to talking about specifically how do we make it interesting and engaging. And we did that by way of making it a very you-centered presentation. It's all about them, making it relevant. And then we added anecdotal evidence like examples and stories and metaphors and hypotheticals to make it more consciously adding engagement and interest for them. The third topic I want to address has come up less in the workshops that I've done in the corporate environment over the years and has come up much more recently but consistently by way of the webinars that I've been running and the online meetings, where I've been working people who are in small businesses and micro businesses that you may well be in as well. And what I'm finding is people asking questions that are a little bit more about, I've got this just incredible life story as we all do, but really the question is, how do I leverage that, or how do I focus that? Or it may not be a life story. I've got an area that I've been studying for years, or some real expertise or personal growth that I've been involved in over many, many years, or a product that I've found can make a huge difference, or a system, or a kind of health system, for instance. And I want to take that to the world because I think I've discovered something here and I think I've got a unique take on it. But how do I go and take that? How do I know that what I've got is going to be well received, is going to be broadly relevant? So that's the question that I want to address in this third video. So let's talk about this and let's explore a couple of things. Let's talk about the idea of who is the audience in the first place. And then the other area that I really want to get into is the idea of how our intention affects the outcome and what it is that we're offering. So I want to explore our intention. But let's start by talking about the audience. And there's two different scenarios that can go on around the audience. The first one is that we've already been given an audience, and the question is, who are they and what do I need from us? And the second scenario is, I have to identify the audience and decide who I'm going to be targeting, this product or this idea or this business, this new business startup. I've got to kind of decide who my target really is. So let's take scenario one, because I get this actually in the corporate world as much as I do in small business, which is I've been given an audience. So I'll give you a couple of examples of this. So for instance, once upon a time, I did some work with a woman who was the head of an insurance industry group association. And she was asked to speak at an insurance industry function. And she came in and she was quite flustered. Or I came into her, I should say. I walked into her office and she was a little kind of uncertain and hadn't started planning and was clearly a bit worried about it all. And I went in and I asked her and I said to her, first of all, tell me a little bit about the conference and what the themes are and what the topic is. And she was able to kind of answer that and what her topic was within the broader kind of topic of the conference. And then I said, okay, so tell me now a little bit about the audience who's going to be there. Do you know how many are going to be there? And she said, oh, look, I don't know that, but I'll find out from the conference organizer who I'm in contact with. I said, terrific. I said, tell me, do you know which parts of the industry they're from and what their roles are within their industry? And she went, I don't know that at all. It'd be a useful thing to know, wouldn't it? And she wrote it down as a question. She said, I'll ask that of the conference organizer as well. And I said, do you know what they really need or want from you? Do you know why they want to hear about this subject that's been identified? Why has this subject been identified? And she said, look, I don't really know that either. I'd better ask that too. And so she ended up with this kind of list of questions to ask the conference organizer. And she said, you know what, if I know the answers to these questions, I'm going to be fine. That's been my problem, is just not knowing who the audience is and what they want. Equally, so I had a beautiful woman on our webinar series, our online meeting series recently. And she's a graphic designer by day and an artist by night, and on her weekends. And she does these just stunning, spectacular murals, like community work. She does this community work, like beautiful outdoor murals on the walls. And she was terribly nervous about a presentation that was coming up where she'd been asked to speak to a small community group about the community work she did and how she did it and the process and the consulting with the community and the physical process and the technical process of actually putting it together and project managing it and right down to the paint she used and all sorts of things. And it just sounded so broad. And a number of times during the online process, I kept saying to her, we need to find out a little bit more about your audience, because she was still feeling quite anxious about it. And what happened, it was right towards the end of the webinar series and we had a little one-on-one catch-up. And she said, look, I finally got some thoughts on paper and I've got a clearer idea of who they are and what they want. And once we've got that, once we know who they are and what they want and why, now we're on a mission. Now it's like, now with the Blues Brothers, we're on a mission from God, as they said in the movie of the Blues Brothers. We're there with a purpose and a focus, and there's a clarity and there's a peace of mind that comes with that clarity. We've got our raison d'etre. So the point is that the more we know about the audience, the more confident we will feel, the more focused we will be. I used the example, I think, in the first video of the difference between a wildfire of information versus a welding flame. And we can only get that welding flame of purpose and focus and message once we know who the audience is. Now that's slightly different, and the way we do that, by the way, sorry, I'll come to the second scenario in a moment. The way we do that is anything from speak to the contact who organised it, Google it, email them directly, ask for some email addresses and email them directly and say, hey, I'm coming to speak to you guys next week about this topic. Can I get an understanding of where you'd really like me to focus, what the emphasis should be? What are you most interested in? Have you got any challenges in your life that you'd like me to address? Are there any particular issues that are bothering you in relation to this? So the more you can have either direct contact with them or a conference organizer, throw Google into play, LinkedIn, any of your social media, that you can find out as much as you can about them. That will help that focusing process, and the understanding of them will help you to make it relevant and help you to feel confident, therefore. Slightly different scenario is where we're deciding what our target should be. So I'm going to take another example from another just delightful lady, absolute privilege to work with her, someone who had overcome cancer in her life and was looking at all the various aspects of alternative medicines and lifestyles that had made a difference to her, and she really wanted to go out to the world, and she'd been in different types of business before that were more creative in nature and online, and now she wanted to do something with just this incredible story she had and wants to take it to the world. And one of the things we explored as we had a one-on-one conversation at one stage is one of the problems that can happen is there may be a lot of players in our space. And so how do we know that what we've got is differentiated, and how do we bring our own unique experience, understanding, and niche? How do we find our niche? So how do we bring that to the world in a way that really does find an angle that's perhaps a little bit different to the rest of the world? And what we explored, so the idea is, what I explored with this lady was the idea of, she was very interested in how slow living had contributed to her well-being and her capacity to fight the cancer. And so we ended up angling it down that because it was a little less broadly explored than some of the angles that we hear about more commonly. And so we really moved it down that track, and it kind of gave her a much more tangible focus. Before, there were almost too many components to what could be included in there. You may have heard the expression, the idea of finding a niche that's an inch wide and a mile deep. And that's what we're really looking for, is a real niche. Many topics these days are a mile deep, of course, because we have access via this technology to so many people on the planet. And so our challenges that we have personally are almost always shared by many hundreds, thousands, or maybe millions of other people on the planet. So that's what we're looking for when we talk about an inch wide and a mile deep. I thought there was a really interesting example when I got my NLP accreditation and life coaching accreditation and Ericksonian hypnosis accreditation. It was all part of the one course which I did with the wonderful Rick Schnabel. And Rick suggested, he was talking about finding your angle, because he's talking about the coaching aspect of this, the life coaching aspect. And he talks about, don't simply have the word life coach on your business card. Again, too broad. You want to find your area that is an inch wide and a mile deep. Are you a voice coach? Are you an anxiety coach? Are you a health coach? Are you a diet coach? Are you a motivational coach? So what angle are you? Because being a life coach is simply too broad, and people simply don't know how to use you. So the more we're able to find the angle more narrowly focused, but you will find within that narrowness an extremely broad audience. So the idea is, whether it's a matter of we're thrown into an audience who we don't know much about, but we need to find out more about, or we are in effect making up our audience. We want to target that really specifically. The way they do this in marketing is they'll create in effect a spreadsheet of all the characteristics of the end audience or customer, the person who's going to be receiving this. Everything about their lifestyle, their average age, their demographic, where they live, how they live. Do they have kids? How many kids? Where do they go to school? What types of schools? What kinds of areas do they live in? What kinds of cars do they own? Really get specific and clear, get a picture of what that audience looks like. In large organizations, they'll often include a name to that person who is their typical customer. So with a superannuation company I work with, I'm fairly sure the name, I hope I'm getting this right, is Sally. Is their typical customer, and I can't remember all the characteristics of Sally, but she's 45 years old and she's got X amount of super and she's a nurse, and this is their typical customer, member, they call rather than customer, member of their organization. And so the more specific and detailed you can get in terms of that picture of who it is you're speaking to, the more clear and comfortable and calm and relaxed and centered you will be as you plan something, you plan your presentation in a way that is directed and meaningful for them. Yeah? So this is about planning your business and planning the presentation for them. Okay. The other piece I wanted to explore was, how do I make it engaging for them? Now, our last video was very much about how do we make any topic interesting and sexy. And so go back to that one if you want some kind of further ideas around how we consciously add interesting content into our topic to make it more engaging and interesting for them. There's a piece I want to go beyond the content that is it's about your confidence, but it's also about the engagement and the interest for the audience. And it can sound a little kind of woo-woo and out there, but it is the fact that our intention affects the outcome and the way that the audience receives the material we're giving them, and how interesting and engaging they find it, according to the authenticity of our intention. If our intention is, I've got to look good, I've got to be impressive, I've got to get it all right, I've got to remember to say it all in the right order, with the right examples, in the right way, I can't leave anything out, I. Are you hearing a theme? Are you hearing a repetitious phrase in this? It's all about me. I've got to look good. And so we become self-conscious. And self-conscious means anxiety and nerves and discomfort. So this is about you overcoming your discomfort, but it's also about creating an intention that the audience can feel that's about genuinely helping them. So the more we are able to think and then imbue into our content, a little bit like we said in our last video about making it you-centered, but we were talking about actually physically saying then the word you, what this means for you, this, how this will affect you is. But we put that into our intention as we start the planning process. It will only come out in delivery. We can only include the you word in our delivery when we're saying it on the day if we've planned it that way and come from that intention in the first place. If our intention is, I really want them to understand the difference it can make for them. I really want them to get that the benefit to them will be this. It can change their lives. It can transform their lives, their health, their well-being, their peace of mind, their profits, their profitability, their efficiency, their productivity, their creativity, their creative problem solving. So the more we're vested intentionally in achieving an outcome for them, the less worried we are about getting all the details right. Because the whole thing is kind of infused with this spirit of truthful, caring, thoughtful, considerate, kindness and warmth and wanting to make a difference. While still being very practical and focused in terms of what am I really offering here, and putting it into a format and including those benefits and including the proof we discovered or we discussed all of that in the last video. Practical stuff has to be there. And then we need to infuse it with this intention of caring and thoughtfulness of consideration. And people sense that like a dog smells fear. They sense the goodness, the good-heartedness, and the desire to make a difference. And that in itself is just enormously engaging and appealing and makes what you're talking about interesting from a delivery point of view. Yeah, so what we're talking about is know them, target them, be specific and clear in terms of who it is I'm talking to, and then care about them and be really considerate and wanting to make a difference to them. And it will just make a massive difference to your sense of, phew, it's not about me. At one level, they don't care about me. They're not interested in me. What they care about is them. And I care about them. What I care about is them. And once we're in that space, there's an enormous sense of kind of relief and knowing that I'm making a difference, and that affects not just your presentation, but your whole business. I read a beautiful line by Mia Friedman the other day, who's just a hugely successful online media. She's got an online media business that is the most successful for women in Australia. She employs, I think, about 100 people or more. Maybe it was 500, excuse me for getting the detail. And she's really kind of ambitious and driven and alive and interesting and grounded and vulnerable and open and a wonderful human being. And she said in the book, she's got a book out at the moment, and their mantra in that business is walk in her shoes, look through her eyes. Walk in her shoes, look through her eyes. What they're talking about is their customer, because they're creating media content for women. And everything they are doing inside that business, the intention behind it is imagine what it's like receiving this information. Who is she that we're speaking to? Look at this content through her eyes. It's not us looking out at the audience. It's imagining yourself in their shoes, looking in and receiving this content, and what does it mean to them? So we're really flipping it around, and that's how we make our content, our presentation, our business relevant and interesting and useful for the world. So what are we saying out of all of this? The idea of how do I know if my content is relevant and interesting and engaging, and if I've got the right niche? The answer is you decide what it is. and you find those people and you find out about them and you explore, you go out and you do your market research and you know who that target market is or you know who that audience is, and you intentionally get it behind it and the universe rallies to support you to include the right content for them. And then you'll fine tune it, because after the first presentation you'll find, oh, actually the question came up about that. I need to make sure I cover that off without them needing to ask that question. And I should add in a little piece about that. And it will evolve over time. There's no doubt about it. It changes over time as new information comes into our world, both about our audience and of course about our topic. So it evolves. But in the first instance, you need to be sure who they are, get really clear about them, and you will feel much more relaxed and naturally create a presentation that is meaningful and that makes a difference in their world. So, what are we doing? Next time we come together, we've got another 6 topics that are amongst our top 10. We can't cover them all in a 4-part video presentation, but what I want to do in the next one is explore some kind of broader ideas that are relevant right across the board. They're like our top tips and tricks that can make a difference, and our 3 big secrets and our big 3 myths that we're going to explode, and we're going to explore different ways and techniques that are going to be useful across the board and how you can take this stuff forward. So it's been a pleasure being with you again, and I look forward to seeing you in our next one. Cheers for now.